Hello everyone, this is Lala, and today I'm back to record and make the Big Brother Twist season ranking where I'm ranking all of the seasons based on the twists that were introduced in their seasons. So when it comes to things like double evictions, which are very common, I'm only going to include that in the Big Brother 5 and Big Brother 7 sections, since those were when the twists of the double eviction became introduced. And for all the seasons afterwards that has the double eviction, they're not really considered twists anymore. So that's kind of just an example of how I formulate things. And it's the same thing with the power of veto, where Big Brother 3 introduces the silver power of veto, and that is really the only time where the power of veto is going to come up in this ranking, since in every season afterwards, it's become a normal function. And it's the same thing with the HOH being introduced in BB2, so it won't be mentioned in any of the other season categories. So at dead last is Big Brother 25. It is clear that the twists in the season were all an excuse to drag the season out for as long as possible, because this was filmed when the strike was taking place, meaning that they made the season 100 days, making it the longest season ever, and they needed to do a bunch of things to fill that time slot. So we mainly had the BB multiverse, which was four different BB universes taking over to break in and to cause havoc, but it was honestly just really boring. The main thing from the BB comic verse that I got was the BB power of invincibility, which essentially saved Jake from eviction in week 4, and the season would have been so much better in hindsight had they just let him go. But this was a clear example of dragging the season out. Then there was the Humiliverse, which was just a bunch of dumb stuff, like the week 3 HOH having stats coming out during the competition and throughout the week, and then week 6 was Humilia week, where there's Stinkometer and all that BS, and then I believe there was a pie nomination ceremony. That part was fun, but otherwise it just kind of sucked. Then there was the scary verse where one person was dragged to the nether region for a few hours for some random reason, though it never really contributed anything. And then there was the scary week double eviction and the Big Brother zombies, where two people were booted in a normal eviction, but they would both come back as zombies for the next week, and then we spent an entire week with absolutely nothing happening, since it was all leading up to one of those zombies returning to the house. And it was just a waste of time. And of course, we then had the nomination competition, where on the first day, the house was split into four, and whomever was last in each of these competitions were nominated for eviction. And the HOH had to save two of those people, where the final two on the block were the nominees for the week. And it was all just very lame. We did have the classic jury format come back, where it was seven people in the jury, which hadn't been the case since I think Big Brother 14, so over a decade. But it kind of didn't work this season because they dragged out the pre-jury for way too long. So essentially, none of the twists in the season really worked, in my opinion. At 23rd is Big Brother 21, where there are a decent amount of twists that didn't really come into play this season, but there are also some major twists that actively made the season worse. So the camp director was pretty much a contrived way to have a day one eviction, whereas the person who was voted camp director was able to banish four house guests and cause them to fight for their lives, which just really sucked. And then the hit the road was the actual competition that the four banners had to play, and I just didn't like it. There was the activity competition where the house guests played in the first 3 weeks, where they're able to win one of three powers, which is the nightmare power, the chaos power, and the panic power. And I don't recall any of them ever actively having any effect on the game. There was the America's Field Trip, which is pretty much the same thing as the temptation competition from Big Brother 19, and America's Prankster was pretty much the same thing as the hacker competition from BB20 and the Co HH from BB20. And yeah, the main reason why this season is so low, or one of the main reasons, is the camp comeback slash previously evicted house guest, which was pretty much done through camp comeback, where the first four evicted house guests would be evicted normally, but they would have to live in the house after their evictions, and it just created a really uncomfortable dynamic. And it didn't look any better based off of who was evicted. So we saw a lot of interactions where people still playing the game were told not to talk to the affected house guests and they didn't talk to them. And it also changed the game because it determined who people would evict, knowing that this twist was into place. In general, all the twists in the season were either ineffective or outright sucked. Hence its placement here. So at 22nd is Big Brother 19. This is the season that was supposed to be the season of temptations, but nothing interesting ended up happening due to these twists. So, the Den of Temptation is arguably the main twist of the season, where America voted on which house guest they would like to get a power, essentially. The Pendant of Protection was the first one, which was pretty much set up for Paul to get to be safe for the first three evictions. The Ring of Replacement was won by Christmas, and she used it to take Cody out of a veto competition during the week that Jessica was getting evicted. And the halting hex was given to Jessica so she could stop the eviction, which happened in week 5. Paul ended up swapping with Cameron, which was just a shitty twist. The temptation competition was also something that took place after the Den of Temptation ended. So for weeks 5, 6, and 7, one person would win it, causing them to be immune for the week, and the person who was last in the competition would be the third nominee, which just continued the steamroll that was already taking place during the early to mid portion of the season. And then the Tree of Temptation was there for week 8, 9, and 10, which were supposed to spice things up, but nothing really happened, as the only time it was used was during week 8, where Mark, who was on his way out, picked an apple, and it was pretty much a safer friend price, and he used it to pick Paul in hopes that it would give him agency. And then for the final 2 weeks, no one used it because Paul told them not to pick up the Tree of Temptation to keep the cult in place. So very unsatisfying just from reading this out loud. So at 21st is Big Brother 18. I feel like if there's a season that is known for its oversaturation of twists and just throwing things out there to see what sticks, it would be this season. So you of course had the relations with the past house guests, which isn't new, but it's clear that they did it this season so there could be more buffers in favor of the veterans, which we clearly saw take place this season. We had teams in a similar vein of Big Brother 11 and coaches from Big Brother 14, but they weren't based on clicks or having a coach. But this was pretty much used for the first 3 weeks. And there was the day 2 or day 1 eviction twist. Yeah, this was the start of the day 2 eviction twist, which just really, really, really sucked and was kind of just unnecessary. And even though we lost Glenn, who didn't really contribute anything, it caused the season to start in a very convoluted way. There was the roadkill competition where pretty much all the house guests compete in it, and whoever wins it has the choice to nominate someone. And if the veto is used on the roadkill nominee, they get to choose it. So it's pretty similar to the MVP twist of BB15, but it lost its luster here. And the majority kind of controlled it here, but not in an interesting way like they did in BB15. Then there was the round trip ticket where from week 5 to week 8, everyone got these round trip tickets, and whomever was evicted from week 5 to week 8 had a chance to come back if they had the right card. So we spent 5 evictions on this, and nothing came to pass, which thank goodness. And it's clear that they only did this so they can make it to their 99-day runtime. And if this twist was successful, there would not have been a second buyback. Then there was the America's Care package, which was just very contrived as well, and was another way of trying to make the season more interesting, but didn't really pay off. So Natalie won the Never Not Pass. James Hewling won the second care package, which gave him the ability to kindle 2 votes on eviction night. And while the Sakia vote was interesting, it wasn't due to this twist, since they had the votes even without it. Nicole then won safety, and then Michelle ended up winning the fourth care package, where she was the co-HOH, where she wanted to nominate Nicole and Corey, but due to Natalie being manipulated by the producers and Michelle not having much agency, she folded and ruined her game in the process. And then Corey ended up winning $5,000 due to the last care package. And this is the first season that had 2 jury buybacks, which also just made things even more contrived and tired. So just me stating all this pretty much explains why BB18 is a lot lower. So at 21st is Big Brother 16, and chronologically, this is one of the final seasons that didn't have a bunch of twists randomly thrown in to make it seem interesting, which is why it's a bit higher on the list. But it's still very low on the list because of the few twists that were on the season. So, Battle of the Block was introduced on the season where two HOHs are crowned, and each HOH nominates two house guests for eviction, and the nominated house guests win or play in the Battle of the Block competition, where the winning pair not only is safe for the rest of the week, but they dethrone the HOH. On paper, this should seem interesting since people from two different sides could win HOH, and two nominees from different sides of the house can go against one another. But this only encouraged the big alliance to stay together and for them to throw a lot of pawns as the Battle of the Block nominees. So they worked around the system. Team America was then a way for three of the house guests to work together to do a bunch of stupid tasks. Some of them involved the game, which never really panned out, and other were just silly tests that didn't amount to anything, and I really just didn't care for any of it. It was pretty much a worse version of the America's Player twist from BB8, which was, I think, 7 years before this. Of course, the jury buyback from the prior season, BB15 continued here and continued for the following two seasons afterwards. And then there was the rewind button, which they did in week 11, where the button was put there, and of course the Huskies pushed it, meaning that by the end of the week, they would have to redo that entire week, which they didn't know about at the time. And it's clear that the producers did this so they can make it to their, I believe it was 98 or 99 day the 97-day time span and to drag the season out longer. So while this season had less twists than many of the ones that came after it, the few twists that were in this season kind of sucked. So that's why it is here. Okay, so ending out the bottom quarter of this list is Big Brother 24. So looking at the list, there's really only three twists in the season, but they're all pretty crappy, hence it being here. So the backstage boss pass was only a twist for the first week, where on night one, the person who wasn't competing in the H8 competition was able to choose three people to take part in the backstage pass twist for or at the end of the first week, but they wouldn't partake in competitions, they wouldn't be nominated, or etc. They would compete. One of them would compete against the evicted house guest, to stay in the house. So someone in the backstage box could be the first person evicted without being nominated for eviction or voted out. So that twist just sucked just from the description of it. But due to Paloma walking out of the game and being nominated via the twist, this twist was cancelled, and thank goodness that it didn't really affect things. Though it did change Taylor potentially being evicted in the first week. But if it was Paloma who was nominated against her, it might not have changed anything. Either way, this was just a convoluted way to make the first week more convoluted and contrived. So the next twist of the season is the Festy Besties, where during week 3, the house guests were grouped together in pairs based off of who performed where in the HOH competition and who choose the person that they want to be their partner. So, due to the post pack still being in power at the time, they chose everyone who was not in their alliance. But due to the drama that happened in that week, a new alliance called the Leftovers was formed and were able to work around the twist. So, this was very similar to the Dynamic Duos twist in BB13, where each pair were nominated beside one another, though only one of them would be evicted. And if one person in the pair was HOH, the other person in the pair was immune for that week. So this twist continued for 3 weeks, and it really did make the gameplay a bit more static pertaining the options for who to be nominated, and it really just wasn't enjoyable. Oh, I also forgot to mention that with a pair who is facing eviction and the remaining pair or the remaining person in that pair that wasn't evicted, they get to choose which other partner to be with instead of giving immunity like BB13. So some duos turned into trios, and that just kind of made things more muddy there. But thankfully, it only lasted 3 weeks. And then the final twist of the season is the split house double eviction that took place in week 7, where the top two people in the HOH competition were the two HOHs, and they chose 4 other people to be with them. One of them were in the house, stuck there all week, and the other were stuck in the backyard all week. What I did not like about this twist is that it encouraged 3 final 5 rounds to happen in a Big Brother season, and the final 5 rounds in general are just not interesting due to there being very limited options. So the few twists that were in the season sucked, though I give them props for not having many twists at all. So, entering the second quarter at 18th is Big Brother 20. So, there was the premier competition, but it was mainly done in the house division, where the house guests were split into two, which was based off the two people who won that from each side, and one of them had to go against the other, and whoever wins is able to save 8 people in the house. Either way, it was just very weird, and I really didn't give a crap about it. So, arguably, the main twist, or one of the main twists of the season, is the BB App Store, which was pretty similar to the prior season's Den of Temptation, which was in BB19, where house guests are essentially given an app to choose from, and they get a twist. Tyler and Bailey were able to get twists. I think Tyler had something that would keep him safe from 8 weeks or whatever. Or if he was nominated, he could protect himself, something along the lines of that. And Bailey won the power app that could cause her to switch the nominations. And that caused for some drama. This could have been interesting if it was used properly, but this really was a decent enough twist. And if it was just this, it would have been a lot higher. The main reason why this season is so low when it comes to the twist is the hacker competition, where they introduced it during the first 2 weeks of the jury portion of the season, where the person secretly wins the hacker competition, meaning that they can overthrow the HH by taking off a nominee and replacing that nominee with someone else that they would nominate. This didn't work out as well in the first week since Haley nominated Tyler and then Angela saved him anyways, and she chose the replacement nominee. And then Casey won the second hacker competition, causing Rockstar to be nominated on Haley's HOH. And this easily made the season a lot worse. Since someone from the level 6 side would have gone home, either Casey or Angela, I don't really know who, there still would have been 2 sides that would have lasted a bit longer, and it really just took things out of it. So, due to the 2 pretty poor twists and 1 decent-ish twist, and a lot of the twists in the modern era kind of just sucking, it causes for BB20 to be here. So, at 17th is Big Brother 22, and I'm honestly shocked that the season managed to sneak up this high. It's not that high, but higher than most of the categories that it probably will be put into on this list when it comes to the twists. So, the have not choosing was kind of whatever, and it was something they continued for pretty much the entire season. They really don't show the have nots on the show anyway, so who cares? There was the room twist where new rooms were added in the house throughout the season, and there were a bunch of twists in it. The first room was the Safety Suite competition, where the house guests had an option to play in the competition, and if they win it, they get the chance to save someone else. And this was available for the first 3 weeks. And this did cause a huge change in the first week, since Kaser ended up winning it and he saved Janelle, causing Cody to completely switch up his plans. It's unfortunate that they gamed the system for the following 2 weeks, so it didn't really lead to anything after that. The second room was the BB basement, which was open in week 5, and 3 people were able to get powers. David won the disruptor, which he essentially used the next week to take himself off the block. The replay is what Danielle won, and it's a power that would cost the outgoing HOH to play the HOH the following week. It's interesting that they included this here and not in BB25, where they just changed the rule randomly. And the blocker was won by Christmas, who wanted to block her or someone else from being nominated post veto. I guess only the David one changed things, which I guess it was okay. And then the neighbor's house was in week 8, where Will moved into the house to usher the next twist. and there were prices that were put in, and this was him introducing the triple eviction, which was something that should have been so exciting. But the way they did it is they had three different HOHs taking place, the other two taking place during that night, compared to the BB Can triple evictions, where one person wins HOH, nominates three people, and two of the three go home. And it really just took out a lot of the excitement of it, and especially the final 7 week where Danielle was on the block. If that was during an entire week, things might have been interesting, but it took out any sort of intrigue with it just being done in 20 minutes. So honestly, the twists in the season weren't that bad. They just really weren't used, and the boring cast really took over any potential that the twists in the season had. So at 16th is the season that followed the last season, which is Big Brother 23. So there's the double or nothing twist where HOH Frenchie could flip it, and if he won it, his entire team would be safe for 2 weeks. But if he failed it, he would be dethroned as HOH, and the second place team would be HOH, which would have been the Queens, and Claire would have been HOH. That really didn't play in effect of anything. There was the wildcard competition where the three teams that weren't safe were able to select one competitor for each team, and whomever won that would be given the task to take safety, and they would have been safe, but the rest of the team would be eligible for nomination. And yeah, there was also a punishment that could have came, and this was kind of just The cash prize was moved from 500,000 to 750,000, and I don't see why that's a twist. That's just a change, but whatever. Um, there was the high roll room twist that was there from week 6, 7, and 8, and there were three opportunities for them to win powers, and it's all based on the amount of coins that they got from the viewing public. So there was the veto derby, which was pretty much about how if the person they bet on ended up winning the POV competition, they would earn a second veto for themselves. So this pretty much happened with Alyssa bet on Alyssa to win the POV, and he threw it so she could win, and he would get the veto off her anyways. And this took part in week 6, and this was okay, I guess. Nothing really stood out. Then there's the chopping block roulette, which was about that if they won, they would be safe for the week and would have the power to remove one of the initial nominees, and they would also be safe for the rest of the week. Alyssa was the only person to play in it, so she ended up winning, and then she chose to save Derek F from the block. And there's also a roulette where someone would be randomly nominated, and that ended up being Xavier. This was okay enough, I guess. Then there was the final twist, which is the coin of destiny, where pretty much the person who won this could challenge the reigning HOH, and they would be an they would anonymously be the new HOH, but they wouldn't be eligible to play the next HOH, which wasn't the case 2 years later. Pretty much Claire won the competition, and a lot of people kind of organized it for her to win this, so she wouldn't be eligible for HOH next week, and she pretty much did what Tiffany wanted. So on paper, these twists are fine, but the cast was just very boring, and the gameplay was so static, so it didn't lead up to anything. So at 15th is Big Brother 13. This is a season that had a decent amount of twists, and very few of them actually worked. So the first one is the duos twist, which is different from the couples or the pairs twist in Big Brother 9, where if one of them went HOH, both of them went HOH. If one of them was evicted, both of them were evicted. Like stuff like that. Where duos, if one person wins HOH, the other person is just immune. And when a pair is nominated, only one of them gets evicted. And in my opinion, I feel like they did this to give the veterans more of a security blanket. And what makes it even worse is that the newbies who did not know each other were paired together, and the veterans who did know one another were paired together, and they're called dynamic duos. So you had a boyfriend and a girlfriend, an engaged couple, and a father and a daughter being paired together. So obviously things were going to be a lot more unbalanced there. Then there is the golden key twist, where the person in a pair who stays for eviction ends up being safe until the final 10, and this continued up until there's only 10 people left. And it was clear that they did this just in case a veteran was on the block and one of them went home. It would cause the other one to be safe for the next few weeks. And then how they handled the previously evicted house guest was that out of the ones who were evicted, there was a vote by the audience, and obviously the veteran ended up winning that, and they had to compete against the person who was just evicted. And another this was another cushion for the veterans if they just so happened to have been evicted. And we saw this with Brendan. Then there was the Pandora's box that was a continuation from last season, and with the way that it happened here, it really screwed up the game as it brought back the duos twist, which obviously benefited the veterans since if one of them was safe, the other one was as well, and it just gave them more incentive. In general, it's clear that a lot of these were put in place to benefit the veterans, and if this is just a newbie season, I think the twists would have been better, if it makes sense, or if what I'm saying makes sense. So at 14th, we have Big Brother 9. So the main twist of the season is the soulmate twist, where all the house guests are paired together based on their quote unquote compatibility forms that they gave and did during the audition process. And honestly, I feel like this was done to maximize drama, which was fine enough, and a lot of the pairs were pretty interesting enough. And there are definitely some elements to this. There was also the X Factor, where they paired exes together, i.e., Sharon and Jacob, but since they only lasted 4 days in the house, you didn't really get much payoff. And then there was the power couple competition, where in the first day, or one of the first few days, one of them won power and they had the sole vote to evict. And I didn't really care much for this. I just felt like it was a convoluted way to start off the season. And it wasn't even like they were given the traditional HOH treatment. Then there's the previously evicted housegate stuff, and the way they did it was just so sloppy. Of course, Joshua had to choose between either Jacob or Sharon to come back, and he chose Sharon. That was fine. But then there was the incident in the fourth week where the audience had to vote for one of the evicted house guests to come back, and they voted Alex. And he had to compete on a vote, not even by a competition, but by a vote by the house guests. And the person that Alex had to compete against was the recently evicted house guest, James, who was just evicted like 10 minutes ago. The house guests did not know who was the returning choice that the audience chose, as they were told that it was a mystery house guest. So it caused them to vote James, and all this was just way too convoluted. And it was clear that they booted way too many people early on in the season, so they needed to drag something out, and this is how they decided to do it. And James's underdog run honestly didn't really interest me a whole lot. There was also the secret relationship where two people who are in a relationship, i.e., Ryan and Jen, were in a house and they were paired off with other people, but because Jen was such a bad player, their inherent advantage was blown up. So I feel like the twists in this season were just so all over the place, and while they weren't too bad, they weren't really great, and all of them were pretty much done in the beginning of the season, making it very cluttered and hard to get into overall. Just finishing out the bottom half of this list is Big Brother 11. So we had the clicks twist, which I feel like could have been interesting on paper, and there are definitely some interesting dynamics here, but something about it just rubbed me the wrong way, though I think it's due to the fact that it had a returning player in it that kind of balanced things and tipped the greatness of what could have been the twist had it solely been newbies. So pretty much the cliques were split up into four groups: the athletes, populars, brains, and offbeats. So I do like that there was some sort of theme towards it compared to a lot of the other team twists in the future seasons that are just a cluttered mess for absolutely no reason. And if a member of the clique won HOH, everyone else in that group was safe as well. And then we had the returning players, which was done in a way where only one of them can come back, and we saw this dynamic in Big Brother 19. And while Jesse is nowhere near as good of a player as Paul, it caused a lot of the dynamics to be surrounded around him, and it created a power structure that he didn't necessarily earn. Since, because he was able to return due to Russell and Natalie dominating the competition, he was the first HOH, which was them protecting him, and by them I mean the producers, and giving him the chance to create the dynamics to be around him. Then there was the coup d'etat, and this could have been very interesting Had it not been an audience vote, at least with Big Brother All Stars, we saw Berkey earn it due to a competition and getting all the clues. But the audience voted on who got it based on how they edited the house guests, and because Jeff was in an underdog position due to his poor play, he got it, and obviously he used it to better his game. I don't blame him for that, but it definitely caused a shift in the season that came off as very manufactured and honestly made the second half kind of hard to watch at times. Pandora's Box was introduced for the first time during this season, and honestly, I kind of forgot about it since a lot of the implementations that were given from the Pandora's Box really didn't lead to a whole lot. And of course, we had America's Winner, which was a result of Chima being expelled and her making it to the jury portion of the season. So there are some good and some bad, and overall, it's a mixed bag, hence it being in the middle of this ranking. So now that we're just making it to the second half of the list, the next on the list at 12th is Big Brother 8. So this is around the start of the end of the casting twists, and as you all know, I really like casting twists, and it's why the season ended up making it in the second half. The Rivals twist is definitely a mixed bag, since while we had Dick and Danielle, estranged parent and child, the relationship definitely was toxic, but it was good television, and we saw them reconcile on the show, though it clearly didn't last afterwards. And it's kind of like one of those perfect bow ending tie situations. But the other two rivals didn't compare as much, especially Carol and Jessica, which was just a stupid middle school, high school pettiness, and neither one of them could even really define what happened. And while Dustin and Joe were exes, and it definitely caused for some drama in the beginning. It blew bright and burnt out very quickly. And it was even worse because two of the other pairs, or the other two pairs, were split up by week three, where two of them ended up going home. And then the final twist of the season, and this one was a huge one, is America's Player, where one person was cast pretty much to do whatever America told them to do, and America was given options to vote for every single week pertaining the nominations, the evictions, who to campaign to go, and other tasks like that. And while it was fun at first, Eric really wasn't given the chance to play his own game. And it's even worse because the production crew told him that if he didn't choose to accept being America's player, and this is before the season started, he would not have made it on the cast. And after a while, it almost came off like a producer manipulation, with them editing the Donatos a certain way, knowing that the cast would respond well to it, causing them to want to vote Eric to protect them. And this continued up to America's Winner, where Eric didn't even have his own jury vote, and he had to vote for Evil Dick. Overall, the season is a huge mixed bag when it came to the twists, which explains why it's right in the middle. Barely missing the top 10 at 11th is Big Brother 17. A lot of the twists in this season were actually reused twists, as Battle of the Block was brought back from last season, and it didn't ruin the season as much during the period that it was in effect, and they ended it in the pre-jury portion, so it didn't last that long. And the twin twist was brought back from Big Brother 5, which was 11 years prior to this, and it was utilized a lot more successfully here than it was in the prior season. So props to that. But as we all know, I'm mainly ranking this list based off of twists that were introduced in this season. And the main twist that was introduced in this season is Big Brother Takeover, where the point of this was that a new twist was supposed to be unleashed with a new twist and attachment to it each and every single week. But it didn't really pan out. The first week pretty much introduced Jack, E, and Jeff into the house. The second week had that phone call that the winner of would be able to cancel a few votes, which they wanted. And the third week, I don't even remember. But after the third week, it was canceled. And I remember that they stated that it was because the cast was delivering so much. But we also had a report a few weeks later that they didn't like most of the people who made it to the jury portion. So I don't know how believable that was. While the season was pretty much left alone and a lot of it was natural gameplay, I do appreciate it, hence it being ranked up here, but the twist wasn't really successful, especially the main twist of the season, so I could only rank it so high. Hence So, ironically, at 10th place, barely making it there, is Big Brother 10. When it comes to how I rank this list, I generally put the seasons that had twists that actively made the seasons worse and or were way too convoluted down at the lower end of the list, and twists that actively improved the seasons that they're in are going to be at the top. And with this season, there really isn't anything to say. There is only one twist, which was the temporary America's player, which was only brought into play during the fourth week, which Dan was given the opportunity to do. And while this week is one of the best in Big Brother history, it wasn't due to America's player, since Dan would have voted out Jesse even without it. And the season would have been fine without it. While I do like that this season essentially had no twists and the game played out as naturally as possible, when it comes to a list of me ranking the twists, it was never going to be too high, since while it doesn't have twists that actively brought down the season or had many twists at all, I can't really say that this twist made the season better, and there weren't many twists that were positive either, like many of the others that are higher than it on the list. So this is the appropriate spot, in my opinion. So at ninth place is Big Brother 12, and honestly, I was not expecting the season to be this high when it came to the twist. But when I think about it, I guess it makes sense since it's very simplistic. There really aren't many twists, and with seasons that don't have many twists, that doesn't affect it either in a positive or a negative way. It is better than the many seasons that had twists affect it in a negative way. There was the Saboteur twist, which was supposed to be the main twist of the season, where one house guest would pretty much sabotage the house by doing a bunch of tasks. But unfortunately for the producers, and fortunately for us, Annie was chosen to be the saboteur, and she was a complete train wreck, and she was booted first, so the twist ended up flopping, and the house was really happy about this. In week 5, they did decide to bring back the saboteur twist for about for 2 weeks, and Reagan took it, and he did fine with the tasks. Nothing really of note happened, but at least the producers could say that the twist wasn't an utter failure. It didn't really affect anything regarding the season, so I was fine enough with the twist. Pandora's Box continued from last season. I don't have much to say about it. But the Diamond Power of Veto is a new twist that came from the Pandora's Box, and Matt did win it, and he was in danger of going home. Actually, no, they told him he was going home in the following week, and he was able to pull out the Diamond Power of Veto and saved his hide, but he decided to use it on Kathy, which essentially just made it an utter waste. But that wasn't the producer's fault, that was Matt's fault. So either way, the twists here were fine, didn't really affect too much, especially since Matt went home right after using the Diamond Power of Rita. So a season that had relatively harmless twists is a decent enough ranking spot for me, and is a season that I don't mind the twist. So here it is. So at eighth is Big Brother All Stars, or otherwise known as Big Brother 7. I'm not shocked that the season ended up making it this high, and it's definitely deserving of its placement. The returning players is definitely a twist, since it's something that was never done in Big Brother before, and it could have easily turned out badly, as we saw with Big Brother 22. But the cast here, while not the best, is definitely good enough, especially for the era that it's in. And America ended up choosing the house guests, which of course caused them to vote in all the people from the recent seasons, though there is some speculation that the producers ignored this and brought in who they would have wanted to brought in anyways, so it just kind of worked in their favor. A huge twist of this season that is also implemented in every other season afterwards is the power of veto players being randomized. So we saw in the prior 2 seasons before this that the house guests and nominees always just actively chose who would play for them or with them in the veto competition. And when it comes to stuff like this, it made it very easy to backdoor someone, which we saw in BB5 and BB6, where having the wheel be randomized here, sometimes the backdoor target did have a chance to win the veto, and they had the chance to play in the veto, and it was just up to fate. So this caused things to be a bit less predictable, and I think here's a welcoming twist. And it ended the outright backdoors, since there's a chance that they could fail, and we've seen them fail in many seasons after this. The coup d'etat was introduced in the season, and while we didn't see the twist itself play out, we did get to see how the person got to the twist, which was by putting down a bunch of clues and for the house to guess what all these clues were adding up to state a phrase. And Mike ended up doing that. If they did this in Big Brother 11, I think a lot more people would have liked the twist even more. And the final twist of the season is the double eviction night, where two people go home on one night. And this is the version of the double eviction that they've used every season after this, and even on Canada. Though I wish they would do the double eviction week like how they did it in earlier this season, BB6 and BB5 as well. Overall, a very solid list of twists pertaining this season, hence its spot here. Ending the third quarter and barely missing out on the last quarter is Big Brother 15. This one definitely shocked me, and I was not expecting to rank it this high on this specific list. So let's get down to the twists. So the MVP twist represents the most valuable player. And this was a twist where America would give this power to a house guest in the house, where they would have the option, no, they would have the requirement to secretly nominate a third house guest. And nominating three house guests is something that hasn't been done in Big Brother history before, if I remember correctly. And the House definitely weaponized this to their advantage, though the fact that it went to Alyssa for all of the first 3 weeks really sucked. But the House guests used this towards their advantage, and it definitely affected how the first 2 weeks of the season went. So it was definitely an effective twist. After the first 2 to 3 weeks, though, it switched to America nominating, but the Huskers didn't know that it was America nominating the Huskers. So there was a lot of paranoia when people like Amanda was getting nominated. But it didn't really change the game much since people outright started ignoring the twist afterwards, and it ended after the first round of the jury portion. So we had the relations with the Paus Haskins, which is essentially Alyssa, who is Rachel's sister, getting cast on the show, and it's something they definitely did in BB18, but it didn't really play a huge part of the season outside of the MVP always going to her. So the final twist of the season is the jury re-entry competition. Yes, there was a time where returning players wasn't common, though people tend to forget that since there's been so many returnee competitions and returnees in the seasons after BB15. But in BB15, I believe it only happened 3 times with Amy, Kaysar, and Brendan being the only, sorry, and James from BB9 being the only four to return after being evicted. And this season did it differently because it's determined by a competition and it was done in the early jury portion of the season, where the first four jurors had to compete against one another to re enter the house. This is something that they did for the next 3 seasons after this. And while it is not as consistent, the jury re entry is something that has been done after this, and returning players that were previously evicted has become a lot more common after this. So the twists in this season were very effective and they've had influence over the future seasons as well. So, starting the final quarter of this ranking at 6 is Big Brother 14. And I'm honestly shocked that the season managed to get it up here, especially since I really do not like the day one boot and it caused a bad precedent to be set in some of the next few seasons. And it just really wasn't enjoyable to see someone only spend a few hours in there, despite them going through the application process for months, being sequestered for a few weeks, and them having to be sequestered for a few weeks after this. Anyways, I did like the coach's twist, and seeing people in the game that weren't actual competitors have to train the other house guests and for them to have their own game too. But unfortunately, it was clear that just based on the amount of time that was left in the season, and contractual stuff that the coaches would eventually enter the game as players. And that's essentially what happened. And you can tell that Bookie wasn't into the game afterwards, and it really became the coaches or the players who were coaches, the veterans, games after this, which is one of the negatives that I don't like about this twist is that the newbies didn't really get a chance to become their own players and form their own games without their coaches. There was the Golden Ball veto twist, which was cool enough, though it was clearly put there at a very convenient time, but I wouldn't have minded it in another scenario. But in general, I feel like the twists in Big Brother 14, outside of the day one fiction, were pretty fine as it is. And I did like seeing the coaches' competitions as well. And seeing the potential of a team being wiped out would have been really cool to see. But clearly, production was not going to let that ever happen. Outside of all of that, the season had very little twists, and I do think that it benefited the season to not have many twists, which also kind of helped it bump up on this list. So at fifth is Big Brother 6, and it's cool that the final five seasons on this list are the first five seasons in the classic era. So with Big Brother 6, I did like the secret partners where they were all individual players, but everyone in the house had someone that they knew, but it wasn't broadcast in the house, which I thought was very cool, and I liked seeing everyone figure it out, though it caused the excitement of it to really crumble as everyone figured it out. There's no secrets there, and everyone made sure that there wouldn't be a pair at the end. The other twist of the season is the previously evicted house guest that was determined by a public vote. And obviously, because Kesar was so loved, Michael really wasn't liked, and Eric was hated by the audience, it was very obvious that Kesar was going to come back. In general, I really like that the season didn't have many twists whatsoever, and the strong emphasis on casting twists that was done in this era really brought the best out of the cast, though it did cause the gender imbalance between the men and the women. But honestly, I think it really works for the season. Unfortunately, I just think that the other four seasons had stronger twists that not only affected their seasons more, but affected the seasons after it and becoming staples, though they were initially twists in their inaugural seasons. Hence why it is here on this list and in this position. But fifth place in this category isn't bad for Big Brother 6. So at fourth place is Big Brother 3. And there really weren't many twists in the season. And the first twist of the season, which is the major one, is the power of veto, where it gives the nominee a chance to save themselves or save someone else from eviction and for the nominations to change. But with the way that the veto was used in this season, where it was the silver power of veto for all the rounds except for one, if a nominee won it, they couldn't use it on themselves, but they could use it on the other nominee, meaning that they couldn't save themselves even with the veto. And because everyone was playing in the veto at the time, it just meant that the probability of someone not on the block to win the veto would be higher, and obviously they would have more incentive to not use it. So the power of veto, while an important twist for the show, ended up being a dud in this season. And they changed it for the golden power of veto in the final five, where the nominee could use it to save themselves, but Marcellus didn't use it, and it's just way too iconic, and we all know what it is. The other twist of the season is the previously evicted house guest twist, where they brought someone back into the game who was previously evicted. As we all know, the first four evicted house guests were sequestered after being evicted, and they had to do a bunch of trivia and they had to do a hypothetical situation of the amount of money that they would give up before they faced a house vote, which caused Amy to come back over Eric. And I really like how they did it here, though a lot of the house guests had resentment over the fact that someone could come back into the game, and it definitely played a part into Amy's journey during the second half of the season. But overall, I liked the twist of the season, and they really did bring something interesting to the cast and season overall. Though I just think the other three seasons are stronger when it comes to their twists. So the bronze prize of third place goes to Big Brother 4. So this season was really the start of the casting twists as they decided to cast exes together in the house, where we had five pairs of ex-boyfriend and girlfriends in the house, and it caused for a few interesting dynamics to happen, though they weren't as explosive as production probably thought that it was going to be. I am docking points because there are three house guests that didn't have an ex whatsoever, and they were kind of just singles, which took away from a lot of the fun and it put them in a position of comfortability that they didn't have to deal with that element. Though it would have been nice to have seen them get rattled due to having an X just like all the others. But overall, I did like the X Factor twist and I wish they did it more. There was this thing where they did the veto competition before the nominations, and I believe they did it in the final six and the final five rounds. I have no idea why they did this, but it was a really stupid twist, and it really took a lot of the momentum and interest out of those 2 weeks, and they were endgame weeks, especially. So it just made it even worse, and I'm glad that they never did this again. There was the Diamond Power of Veto, which was essentially the final four veto, which I guess this was a twist in this season because there was no veto in the final four of Big Brother 3. So the fact that they have it here, though they're calling it the Diamond Power veto, though it's just the normal veto that they do in the final four, and they changed the Diamond Power veto to mean something else, as we've seen in Big Brother 12. But that's all beside the point. This twist in the final four was definitely a good one as well. And the final twist that we have on this season that is very huge and has taken over every season since this season is the sequestered jury, where it caused the jurors to obviously talk about the game amongst themselves and for them to formulate how they want to reward their winner, but they didn't have the influence of the general public, the edit of the show, and the public perception and seeing the diary rooms of how the people still in the game really felt about them. So that perception really wasn't influencing them. And I really liked that they did the sequestered jury, and it's a staple in the show. And there really would be no Big Brother without it. So I do appreciate this twist, and the twist in Big Brother for the most part, is really, really good. And I can see why they became staples. So the silver prize of second place goes to Big Brother 5. So this season has a decent amount of twists and they really changed the game. So with the veto competition, they decided that only 6 people can partake in the veto competition, which gives the nominees a lot better chances of winning the competition since it gave them a 1 in 6 chance, where in prior seasons it would have given them a 1 in 13, 1 in 12, 1 in 11, 1 in 10, 1 in 9, 1 in 8, and 1 in 7 in those earlier weeks, just giving the incentive for someone who's not on the block a higher chance to win. But with this, it means that the chances of the nominees winning the veto are 2 in 6 since there's 2 nominees. And it means that the HOH and the entire house had to be on their toes. And they did this because they saw how in the prior 2 seasons, the veto in general was just not getting used. And we saw a lot more usage of the veto due to this twist. We then had Project DNA, which was definitely split into two, with the twin twists, which were so interesting to watch at the time, to see them maneuver it and to see that moment where they all come into the game, which was already a very tense moment due to the drama post Scott eviction, and having Natalie just walk in with Adria was just an epic moment. And then there was the siblings twist, where two half siblings who did not know of one another's existence ends up being stuck together in the house, and it was definitely psychologically damaging for Nokomis, and she was put into this game, and the fact that she had to realize that she was only recruited to be a part of this game due to be exploited this way was really, really tough. And we saw her melt down about it in the final four. And the final twist of the season is the double eviction week, which isn't the same as the double eviction that we have come to know, but I actually do like this version of the double eviction, where they did an eviction 2 days after the prior eviction, and then the second eviction would be 5 days afterward. And it really sped up the end game of the season since they did it here in the final six. And as we all know, the end game weeks are generally the most boring since there's so little options and everyone's just drained and they wanted to go home. So to have it sped up here was a great choice and it really helped with the pacing of this season. And the gold place prize, first place, goes to Big Brother 2. Honestly, it is very impressive that the first season of this format ended up topping all the others, despite this being a 23-year-old season as I'm recording this. But there are so many changes that were made from the first season that really made Big Brother a pop culture phenomenon and a reality TV staple. One, we have the twist that the nominations are allowed to be discussed not only amongst the other house guests, but with the HOH in general, where they can plot who they would nominate, and It really pushed the strategic elements of the show that was dormant in Big Brother 1 because they were following the international versions, and as we all know, that did not work in the US. So this was a definite need and a definite change of pace that really benefited the show overall. The second twist is the fact that there's a head of household, which is created by a competition where the person who wins the competition ends up being the sole person that controls the two people that are nominated for eviction, and one of them goes home. So not only can you save yourself and your allies with this power, but you also determine one of the two people who will go home at the end of the round. The next twist is that the house guests vote out someone. So obviously in Big Brother 1 and in the international versions of the show, the house guests are voted out due to the public vote, and it makes it boring because they tend to vote out the more boisterous and the more interesting personalities, and the more boring and tame house guests remain in the end, but it doesn't make for a good show. But with the house guest vote here, people are voting out others that they either do not like, that aren't in their alliance, that they just can't live with, or people that they are genuinely threatened by on a gameplay point of view. So it adds a lot of different layers, and it also encourages a lot more drama, a lot more backstabbing, and a lot more deception. And then the final twist that was added in this season is the jury. So, as we all know, the very first season of the show and the international versions determined their winner by the public vote, but in this season, it is determined by the house guests that were voted out. So, depending on how you treated the house guests that you voted out and how they reflect on the game by just thinking back to their experience in the game, but watching the season will determine whether you will win or not. And while I don't really like the public influence of this due to the fact that the jurors are watching the show live with the general public and they know how everyone feels, that can definitely influence the vote. But in general, Big Brother 2 changed things up so much to the point where all of the twists introduced in the season are Big Brother staples, and there really would be nothing without it. So that concludes my list on ranking the twists in the Big Brother seasons based on the seasons that the twists were introduced in. And this was definitely an interesting one, and it was kind of hard too, since there are so many twists in some seasons, while in other seasons there were very little twists. While some seasons had their twists heavily benefits the season, while other seasons had their twists that negatively impacted their seasons, and some seasons had twists that really didn't play a part into anything, so they're kind of just eh. So I have the ranking the pre-juries, juries, and end games videos that I should get done soon before I rank overall the Big Brother seasons by combining all the elements. I definitely have some other Big Brother related content that I'm going to make soon. I also have some other reality TV content that will be put out soon, and some stuff that doesn't really involve reality TV. So look out for all of that. Like the video, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and I'll be back with other stuff too. So if you're interested in all that, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for watching and supporting, and I'll be back with stuff soon. Ciao!